Hey guys, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. A couple weeks ago I made a video discussing 5 Liyue units that I think were deserving of buffs, and given that many first generation characters have collectively been struggling to maintain presence in the metagame, that comprises Mondstadt, Liyue, and Inazuma. That is to say, Inazuma units could use some attention as well, not just Mondstadt and Liyue. Genshin's history can be sectioned off into 3 quote-unquote generations. First generation spans version 1 and 2, units who came out way back in the day, many of whom have since become obsolete. Second generation units, those who came out in version 3 and 4, are doing relatively comfortably, not great, not bad, although a number of version 3 units have seen better days. Currently, we're in the third generation, version 5 and 6. It's safe to say the vast majority of the first generation has determinably fallen behind in relative power scaling, hence why a number of Mondstadt units have been getting buffed. By and large, 90% of version 1 and 2 units need some juice if they want to keep up. So with that in mind, I'll be going through 5 Inazuma characters that I believe would benefit the game if Hoyo was willing to do a sweep through other regions besides Mondstadt. And of course, like last time, just because a character isn't mentioned doesn't mean I don't think they should be buffed. I only have time for 5. After you're done watching, let me know in the comments down below what units you would like to see buffed and how you would buff them, but without further ado, let's begin. It should come to no one's surprise that Raiden Shogun will be the first and foremost priority target on the list. Like other Archons, Shogun represents an integral part of the greater Tevad mythos, and she's also one of the most popular waifus in the game. From a marketability standpoint, it's in Hoyo's best interest to keep her well maintained. Unlike Zhongli and Venti, who for better or worse were one-tricks, Shogun's been working part-time as a Hyperbloom driver throughout version 3 and 4, and she's one of the better ones out there. Lately though, due to her personal merit falling behind considerably in performance, said part-time job has become more of a full-time job, where you basically never see her being a main attacker anymore. But even as a Hyperbloom enabler, though Dendro has made a return back into the metagame, generally speaking, Shogun is a replaceable asset in Hyperbloom teams. It's not like she's head and shoulders above other Electro options in that department. Suffice to say, she doesn't live up to her title of Electro Archon like she used to in the past. Shogun's biggest shortcoming right now is that her damage has not kept up all that well. Her status as Electro's best attacker was contested as early as Clarent. Since then, however, we got a bunch more Electro units who can push higher numbers and better consistency like Varessa. I think what makes it difficult for Shogun to scale well with other units pertains to her main way of getting power. She effectively needs her entire party to have damaging ultimates and high energy cost ones at that. The problem is we haven't really gotten that many units like that, and buffing her personal attack strength with units like Farina and such really doesn't get the same returns compared to if she were to buff anyone else. With that in mind, a general buffing round would be the best option to go for. To start, her elemental skill should do more proc damage. It's way too low by the standards of most coordinated attacks. Duration and cooldown are fine, those don't really need to change. Now, for the elemental burst damage part, I think instead of it being dependent on the recipient's cost, it should be based on some other static metric. My reasoning for this is that by having it be contingent on party member energy costs, it essentially disqualifies her from playing with anyone that doesn't have a cost north of 80, and it also prevents her from playing with anyone that doesn't have an energy cost to begin with, like Mavuika, Skirk, and inevitably someone else in the distant future. I think a flat boost, while boring, would be better at future-proofing her, especially if hypothetically Hoyo decides to release any characters that demand 100 energy or more. Another issue affecting her performance I would say is how difficult it can be to raise her energy. Despite scaling off energy recharge, Shogun can run into situations where her ultimate doesn't come up when you need it to. For one, in Stygian Onslaught you open at 0. 2. Shogun could run into a situation where if she ults towards the end of a chamber, she has to build her energy back up again from scratch, where she would normally rely on her burst to bring her back up to speed. I think adding a contingency plan to her to give her the ability to burst more frequently would come in handy. For example, Mavuika can pop her burst at half power if you need to, even though you obviously want full fighting spirit. Shogun could do the same thing where you can adjust her ultimate to have 60 and 120 energy hypothetically, and in addition to that, allow her to get full energy restoration from even non-electro particles. Alongside that, her burst could use more uptime. 7-second duration and 18-second cooldown is pretty unforgiving in this day and age. It worked in the past when Shogun practically one-shotted everything, now not so much. 10-second duration would be more weaponizable I think. We shouldn't make it too long, otherwise towards the tail end of the burst, party buffs like Bennett's will wear off. Overall, Shogun has a fine concept to her, she just needs more power and consistency. If there's a 5-star unit who's been in desperate need of quality of life improvements, it would have to be Yoimiya. Yoimiya is a character with a great premise, marred by how terrible she feels to play and design choices that make no sense whatsoever. Without question, the worst part of her kit is the complete absence of any logic to her elemental burst. It tags an enemy with a mark that causes an explosion upon being struck by her team's attacks or abilities. Not her, but her team's, which makes no sense to have on her main DPS. She should not be setting up her team, they should be the ones who are setting up her. I know any sub-DPS character could take care of that nice and easily, but overall, Yoimiya's burst does not play toward her win condition all that much. The other two problems in her kit are 1. The fact that she's a normal attack bow wielder. Why that's bad is because, as you know, bows only attack a single enemy at a time, typically whoever's closest to you. Furthermore, you have no control over the auto-targeting. There's no lock-on system or target selection in Genshin. If you're trying to kill a boss but there are goons in between you and them, Yoimiya will focus on those guys. 2. Yoimiya's attack rotation is such that the strongest attacks in a sequence are the last ones. If you look at her attribute scaling, basic attack 3, 4, and 5 do noticeably more damage than 1 and 2. However, if you recall in Genshin, anytime you reposition, cast an ability, get staggered, or do anything except attack, you reset back to basic attack 1. The second factor effectively forces Yoimiya to have a shield to maximize damage because she shouldn't move, and as you know, most shield supports don't have the same buffing capability that healers or full-on buffers do. So Lali's about the best option Yoimiya has at her disposal, and that's about it. Very slim pickings in general. The best way to buff Yoimiya would be to make it so she can lock onto her priority target. It boggles my mind how her elemental burst applies a mark onto a single enemy, but that mark doesn't cause her basic attacks to lock onto said target. Let's start there. Completely redesign her elemental burst to cause her attacks to deal bonus damage to the marked enemy. If and when the enemy dies, it will create a massive explosion based on the number of shots applied to the target before it died. I got this idea from Tristana in League of Legends. One of her abilities has her plant an explosive bomb onto a target, wherein if you attack that target, it makes the bomb bigger. We could do something similar for Yoimiya. This will not only address the targeting issue, but it could also give Yoimiya some semblance of AoE. Currently, she has no practical wave clearing at all. The AoE explosion from this new hypothetical burst would give an actual purpose to the ability while giving her some potential for wave clear. Besides that, interruption resistance while a skill is active and some extra numbers on uptime would be good for her. Either that or make it so you can move around and she will still continue her attack sequence without resetting back to 1. I don't want Yoimiya to overshadow Lyney too much, so we shouldn't make her too overpowered. Make it more of a playstyle preference between the two. Ayato is another Inazuma character that has a strong concept and premise, even a fun playstyle if you will, but just doesn't have the numbers or use cases to merit the opportunity cost of pulling and using him. For those who watched my Why No One Plays Ayato video, you'll recall there were 3 key reasons behind his unpopularity. Firstly, he just doesn't do damage. Ayato's scaling is on the level of a 4-star in raw damage. He has hybrid scaling off attack and HP, but like I said countless times in the past, if you plan to make a unit scale off a non-DPS stat like HP or defense, the numbers better be good to make up for the stat itself not being an offensive parameter. Sadly for Ayato, he doesn't do well in either. His attack and HP scaling are both kinda mediocre, so by trying to build into either of them, you're not gonna get anywhere. Give him more numbers. I know it's boring to just increase numbers, but Ayato could really use it. Secondly, Ayato's in a very unusual niche. He's a main DPS character who specializes in Hydro application. What makes Hydro so good is that most of its units can apply Hydro off-field. Only Ayato is intended to be on-field, sort of cancelling out the whole convenience part. Again, this wouldn't be a concern if Ayato had actual damage. Thirdly, Ayato is a rapid attacker, making it difficult for him to play to a forward vaporized win condition. Mulan works on forward vape because she focuses on power, not frequency. These 3 factors make it extremely difficult for Ayato to find an optimal niche to play in. Novelet works as a rapid attacker because he has the numbers to back it up. He doesn't have to care about vaporize. Now, rather than solely buffing Ayato's numbers, a more interesting way to buff him would be to actually double down on the reaction buffing thing by turning him to sort of, I guess, like Nilou, where despite being the main cause of her team's damage, she technically isn't a DPS character. They could make Ayato a full-on reaction buffer who just happens to be on field. Not too sure what form that should take, but perhaps in a similar fashion to what they did for Mona with Duran. That way, Ayato won't just be a discount novelette, and he can play into his own niche. I'm honestly not sure how to buff Ayato, he's such a weird character. I mean, they could play into the main DPS part by making his skill do more damage or causing his ultimate to actually contribute DPS instead of just applying Hydro, but if we go down that route, again, Ayato would just become Novelette 2.0. One other idea that I had was to add team synergy for him. Make it so he gains upgraded abilities when in the same party as Ayaka. That could also be a fun way to buff Ayaka as well. A brother-sister duo where if you cast Ayaka's ultimate inside Ayato's ultimate or vice versa, it creates a giant ice tsunami or something ridiculous. I wouldn't mind that either. It makes the character more viable without overlapping with anyone else. They encouraged an all-Natlan team in version 5, I don't see a reason against doing an all-Inazuma team perhaps. You know, speaking of a mono team, Gorou will be number 4. Mono Geo is practically dead right now, and I think a lot of that has to do with Gorou being a pretty lousy character in his own niche. Or rather, he's not particularly bad at being a mono Geo buffer, but just like with the other units in the city, quality of life and number scaling do need to go up. I think they should expand on the Mono Geo premise more than Gorou's current state, increase his buffing repertoire so that he's a bit more like Vars or other element-specific supports. The best way of doing that in my opinion would be to play into the same thing that Nilou, Chevres, and stuff do. Currently, Gorou's only incentive to have extra Geo units are skill and C6, even then they're not very big increases compared to the type of power Nilou, Escoffier, and Chevres give. Before any of that though, Gorou needs energy. He just doesn't batter enough for himself or for Ito, often the reason why people had to run all bait over the third-party slot to supplement. I mean, you were gonna do it anyway on account of the Mono Geo thing, but if Gorou could supply more energy on his own, that would be helpful. Anyway, back to the Mono Geo thing. Being mono element and not a reaction playstyle, Gorou should just give more buffs. He already gives defense, bonus geo damage, crit damage, and interruption resistance. Maybe what they could do is simply add a 4th buff if you have a full team of 4. Right now he only cares about if you have 3 geo units, but at that point you can't play into any other reaction. You might as well full send into all 4. Increase the crit damage on C6 to like 80% if you have 4 party members, and perhaps boost his ultimate to deal actual damage or lower enemy defense with a crystal collapse. Alternatively, kind of like what I alluded to in my Liyue video, play into a more Geo Construct style where instead of the number of characters on the team, maybe have Gorou scale out the number of Geo Constructs instead, possibly increase the power of those Geo Constructs or something. Frankly, I don't play Mono Geo, so I'm just spitballing here, but it would be nice to see more off-meta strategies in the game. Last character will be Kujou Sara. Much like Gorou, I feel like Koyo was trying to cook with a few divergent playstyles in version 2, but didn't have the foresight to realize if you're gonna make a team not playing to conventional strengths, you have to make the payoff worth it, otherwise you're doing so much extra work for the same or potentially even less benefit. Sara is one example of that. To begin with, the massive pain point for Sara is how awkward she feels to play. Needing to use your skill, then do an aim shot, then waver the Crow Feather to proc all while your skill makes you backstep away so you have to dash back in range to get the buff, and even after you do all that, you only get 6 seconds to do something, and it only applies to the active character. All of this on a unit with an expensive long cooldown elemental burst and poor energy regeneration. If you can have Vars give a mountain of buffs to animal units ranging from bonus animal damage to follow-up animal damage to minor grouping to crit damage and everything in between, Kujou Sara should be able to do the same. Beginning with the Ray 4 passive, it's completely pointless in her kit. It really shouldn't have a cooldown that long for how small the battery is. If we were to replace it altogether, offering maybe bonus crit rate or something to combo into her C6 would be nice. Perhaps like a 10% crit rate boost to the entire team after doing an aim shot, since you have to in order to use her skill. Duration also needs to be increased of course. A 6-second duration is just hard, you can't even use it at that point. I get that at rank 13 it's a 91% attack boost, which is a big deal, but realistically you can only use it for like 4 or 5 seconds when accounting for the time it takes to play Shogun or Kuching or Clarence burst animations. Meanwhile, you have Bennett who provides an attack boost to the entire team even better than Sada's and for twice the duration. %60 crit damage on C6 is nice, but Yeon-san basically invalidates Kujou Sara completely. Yeon-san does more for Electro units than Kujou Sara does. Well, technically they're not in the same niche, Yeon-san's more Nanlan build, but you get the idea. Obviously, making Sara more accessible is the most straightforward way to make her worth picking out. Longer duration on her attack buff, maybe give her better energy, or give her more buffs to incentivize a mono Electro team. Like, I'm being serious, just give her a stacking buff based on her team. Better yet, we could have her be the Inazuma version of Nanlan where she gives more buffs to the team based on how many Inazuma units you have. Putting together like Raiden Shogun, Zara, Kazuha, and Shinobu for a mono Electro Inazuma team, and then Sara could give everyone a super crazy buff could be a unique but potentially viable way to make Sara worth a shot. If they don't want to go that far off the beaten path, then they can always just give her more numbers, less clunkiness, and more uptime. There are more Electro DPS units now than before too, so she could support more than just Shogun. If they want to make her more situational than Bennett, there has to be higher upside. Alrighty, so those are the 5 Inazuma characters that need buffs in Genshin Impact, among others of course. Let me know in the comments how you would buff these units if you could, along with anyone else you have in mind. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you like to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other video on Liyue units that need buffs if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.